Welcome to the Classy Stevo podcast, where every day is a golden moment in time. We talk about the news, artistic culture, training methods, nutrition, and more for classic bodybuilding, as well as updates on the fitness industry. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. The show is about to get on rolling. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Classy Stevo podcast show. So I decided for our first official series, basically to revolve around and engage in bodybuilding evolution. So in other words, where bodybuilding initially started off, I'm not going to go as far back to as when physical fitness per se started off, but rather bodybuilding specifically. So I'm going to start along the lines of the silver era of bodybuilding. Now, if you're not familiar with the silver era of bodybuilding or that term, basically what it means is where bodybuilding started roughly in the 1940s through, some say, the 60s. I guess if you want to consider the golden era of bodybuilding, I guess some can say it started in the late, or actually the early 70s, 1970s. But basically, my definition of the silver era is generally around the 40s and 50s, maybe into the early 60s. Nevertheless, this is the era where bodybuilding really started taking its roots. A lot of people today are actually not very familiar with this era simply because bodybuilding in general didn't really get recognized until I would say around the 1970s, which I will be getting into later on in the evolution series. So focusing on the silver era, guys around this era, mostly, if not all of them, were completely natural athletes. So in other words, these were guys that were not on gear or on any kind of drugs or enhancements. They had, as some would say, attainable body compositions and types. Of course, everyone has their own genetics, so each body will look different from another. But my point is, if, say, you started working out today and you spent the next several years building on your body and progressing, such as, focusing on your nutrition, your weight training regimens, you could potentially look like a lot of these silver era guys. Now, given some of them had some incredible genetics, for one like Steve Reeves, as well as Reg Park. Those were two of the most common, well-known silver era idols, if you were to know about that time and age. So in other words, basically this is an attainable, achievable area that natural athletes could reach the physiques that were present at that time. Now, during the silver era of bodybuilding, overall, weight training was, it was definitely not nearly as involved or detailed as it is today. In other words, they had less machinery. It was more of the basics. In fact, they had machines that you don't even see mostly now in today's fitness industry. So if you were actually to go on Google and look up their machinery that they used to use back in the silver era, most likely you're not going to find those machines in today's gyms unless you literally just find like a really old school weightlifting gym. Then you might find some of that existing leftover machinery. But they had very basic techniques. It was not very advanced at the time. So in other words, they stuck to the basics like bench pressing, squatting, overhead pressing, as well as some very interesting movements that you could actually research on Google and look up, but movements that you just would not see really any weightlifters do nowadays, much less like personal trainers showing people. So it's interesting. There's so much culture behind the silver era, but like I said, Steve Reeves was a very common one. He won multiple titles at his time. He was around 6'1". He's actually built, not built, I guess, but he was same height as me. I guess some resemblance, but he was really known for his overall wide sweeping lats and just like a narrow waist, especially from the side. And that was a thing that they really focused on during the Silver era. A lot of the guys focused on those small waistlines. So, for example, if you've ever heard of Vince Gironda, he was a really well-known Silver era idol at the time. He weightlifted through the 40s and 50s, as well as training a lot of the old school guys at the time, especially Hollywood models as well. So he was a very well-known guy. He actually opened up his own gym, Vince's Gym in California, where he trained a lot of the celebrities and whatnot from Hollywood. And he was also known for really pushing the diet of low carbs and high fats. So he was really on to the whole steak and eggs diet, which if you follow Artemis Dolgan, he really pushes that as well. Now, I will say the combination is phenomenal with the diet and all. So, but he was a big believer in just the high fats, high proteins, taking in the amino acids, all that stuff. So he had a relatively smaller physique, but he really focused on that symmetry. He was an all-natural bodybuilder as well at the time. So he looked pretty phenomenal. And he believed in a lot of different methods in keeping the waist small while enlarging like the legs as well as the upper body. But he was all about that symmetry before size. And that was the biggest thing in the Silver era time, was not about the size of the bodybuilder, but rather the symmetry, the flow, the artistic, just picturesque, perfect like body type. And that's what it was all about. So yeah, it was a really different industry at the time. Like I said, it was very basic. Even supplements weren't that advanced at the time. They had like liver tablets, but nothing like creatine didn't even come out till decades later. But basically it was very, very simplistic at the time. So they relied a lot on whole foods. There wasn't really too many supplements at all. So, and of course, whey protein was like way down the line as well. That didn't even come in until later on through the golden era. So we're talking some time ahead, but the Silver era was a very interesting era. I'm going to pick up more on this era in the next podcast, try to cover a little bit more in depth and detail before we move on to the golden era of bodybuilding. So that will be it for this podcast. Let me know what you think about this, how this is going so far and whatnot. I'm still kind of learning to, basically improvise off of my knowledge and thoughts of all the different bodybuilding topics. So this is a work in progress, guys, but I'm trying. But anyway, thank you for listening in on this podcast. Be sure to leave it a like and share if you feel like there's any others that would benefit off of this unique information. Like I said, I haven't really seen any other podcasts out there that revolve around bodybuilding, much less classic bodybuilding. So I thought this would be a really good outlet for a lot of people to, chime in and just learn about all the different culture and knowledge behind bodybuilding through audio. So I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening in, and always have a golden day, guys. Cheers. Thank you again for tuning in to the Classy Stevo podcast. Material is generally posted on a weekly basis, so please stay tuned in for the next release. Your support, guys, is greatly appreciated, truly. So feel free to share this podcast with others and spread the positivity with them. And always remember to have a golden day. Cheers, guys.